Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Talking Pictures. I'm your host, Tim Rosenberger, and today we're going to be talking about Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Before we get into that, just a little note for people listening. I am recovering from a cold, so I probably sound a bit stuffed up, and I may be coughing a little bit in this, but hopefully not a lot. But if you hear some of it, that is why. I also want to let everyone know that I'm also hosting another podcast called The Criterion Collectors, which covers films that have been released by the home video company The Criterion Collection, or films that are currently on its streaming service. That is being hosted by 25 Years Later. That is a film and TV news review site. Its website is 25yearslatersite.com. There's one episode out of that podcast right now, and that can be found on Anchor FM. I'll put a link to that in the video description. Criterion recently released a Godzilla box set that covered a number of the early Godzilla films. I'm really proud of how that turned out, so please check that out if you can. And also, I do want to let everybody know that I know there haven't been tons of podcast episodes lately. There will be more. I've just been really busy, and there will be other topics besides just, Oscars and Star Wars, even though the next podcast will be about the Oscars. That'll come out early February, but there will be other topics. It's just been really busy, and so it's been hard to get other topics done, but there will be other ones, so it will not become a Star Wars Oscar podcast. So we're going to be talking about, again, Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker today, and to talk about that is returning guest who's talked about Star Wars for all of my other Star Wars podcasts, my friend Andrew. Andrew, thanks for coming on again.
Absolutely, Tim. It is my pleasure as always. And this time, this could be a very interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, reviews are very mixed right now, so we'll see if our thoughts are mixed and if our conversation is mixed. So before we get into The Rise of Skywalker, I don't remember all the news that has happened, Star Wars news that has happened since we last recorded. I think it was like in September, I think of last year, so it's been forever and a half, and I can't remember everything that's been announced and canceled, and all that stuff. The biggest thing right now is that as we record this, Disney Plus recently-ish was launched, and I believe it's the only show on there. Right now is The Mandalorian is currently viewable. The first of possibly more seasons of that has launched. I'm assuming you've been watching that.
Of course, yeah. That was a no-brainer for me, and it's really quite good. There's only one episode left. They're releasing it weekly,
okay,
as opposed to having it bingeable. So every week there's a new episode. But no, it's really good. There's some surprising things that happen that fandom and the world at large was not quite ready for, I don't think. And it's good. And to your point, they have already started production on season 2. So it'll be back, I think, probably in 2020.
Cool. My wife and I have not yet gotten Disney Plus. I've been fighting it for reasons that have to do with Disney and some of its business practices, but we'll probably get it eventually because the show does look cool. For people listening, I have nothing against Disney Plus in concept. It's just that it's run by Disney,
which runs everything now. So
yeah, which is probably
are you boycotting everything?
No. I'm just right now being stubborn because, well, two things. One, streaming is starting to become a tool of evil instead of a tool for good, which I am against because it could be used as a way to basically control exactly what you watch, and you can't watch what you want, whatever you want, which is one of the glorious things about DVDs and all that stuff. And two, I'm just against this whole Disney monopoly thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my reason, but I will probably watch it eventually. I mean, we'll get it eventually. We'll see.
Yeah,
it does look cool because it's like the show. It's like a Western, right? Is that what
very, very much, and a specific type of Western. It's definitely the spaghetti Western.
Man with No Name thing.
Sergio Leone and the Clint Eastwood, right? Like the Man with No Name trilogy of movies is very evident as being the inspiration for a lot of it, which is really kind of interesting because the inspiration for those movies are Japanese cinema, and that was George Lucas's original inspiration for Star Wars, was a lot of those. So it kind of comes full circle, and it's kind of neat how that all worked out.
For people who don't know, Magnificent Seven is a American remake of Seven Samurai and stuff. So there was a precedent, even more than just inspired by, but actually just remaking Japanese movies as Westerns.
Yeah, and I think Fistful of Dollars is basically a remake of Yojimbo, almost to the point where I think there was legal action taken. But yeah, Mandalorian, very good. I give it a solid thumbs up.
Yes, and we might, if and when I finally get Disney Plus, maybe we'll talk about that, since it does look really cool. They finally gave Ewan McGregor a break, and they announced that there was going to be, it's a show, right? It's a Disney Plus
Yep.
show for
Yep.
an Obi-Wan. I'm assuming I would hope a post episode 3 before
Yep.
episode 4 thing. So how do we feel about that? Because I don't think they've released any details of it, have they? Except for that they're doing it.
They have not released any details other than that they're doing it. You're right. But originally, from what I understand, it was going to be a movie. And then I think after Solo, they decided to rein back the movie plans and convert it over to a TV show, which, I mean, I don't really care. I'm just excited to see Ewan McGregor back as Kenobi because he was awesome in the prequels, and I want to see more of that.
I'm fine with something like The Mandalorian being like an ongoing TV show, whether it be like a 6, 12, or more episode. I don't know how many episodes they have. But my problem with Obi-Wan doing that is, because my thing for it is having it be like a Western set on Tatooine. Now, on a movie you can do that, and for like a limited series of 6 or maybe even 12 episodes you can do that. But for an ongoing series, I feel like they would be compelled to get him off the planet after a certain point. Which, one, I don't think would even be smart. I wouldn't think, why would he even leave the planet? He would want to stay there, one, because he's watching Luke, and two, he doesn't want to risk being found out by the Empire. I think you could have an ongoing series totally on Tatooine. Whether they would be brave enough to do that, set it all in one location all the time, I don't know if they would want to do.
Yeah, and my other thought, because I know we've talked about this in previous episodes. I think when we were talking about the rumored movie, about how that's what I really wanted as well, was a Western style movie of Kenobi on Tatooine. But now that they've got The Mandalorian following that vibe of the Western, I'd be surprised if they put another Western styled Star Wars show on the same platform and not try to change and make it feel different so that there isn't any brand confusion. But yeah, I would prefer it to be a Western. If it's not, I don't know really what kind of vibe they could have on Tatooine.
I don't know. The only things I could think of, well, this is just totally spitballing off the top of my head. They could do maybe a gangster thing, more of a crime thing, though I don't know really how much Obi-Wan would be getting involved in the Jabba the Hutt type crime stuff on Tatooine.
If anybody is looking for a really good Star Wars book, they should read the book Kenobi by John Jackson Miller, and it is a very Western styled story, but it's really good. It's no longer part of quote unquote canon because it came out before the Disney purchase, but it's probably my favorite all-time Star Wars book. It's just really well written and really, really fascinating. And there's a really good balance of Kenobi trying to live by the Jedi ideals without actually letting anybody know that he is a Jedi, which can be problematic, when you're using the Force and a lightsaber and all that. But it's really good. And my dream would be that they get John Jackson Miller as consultant or have him write some scripts or something for the show, because that book is incredible. The other thing that we do know about it is it's directed by Deborah Chow. All of the episodes are going to be directed by her. I don't know a lot of her background. Most of it seems to be in TV. She's directed 2 of the Mandalorian episodes, and the 2 that she has directed are both incredible. But I think she's done some other TV, Mr. Robot. I think maybe she did a episode or 2 of Jessica Jones on Netflix. But I think it's going to be a good show because Deborah Chow seems to be like she's a really good director in that universe. And again, Ewan McGregor doesn't get much better than that.
I love Ewan McGregor is a great actor, so I'm excited to see him finally getting to do that after so long. So we'll see how it turns out. Now
they've also announced Cassian Andor series. He's the main male lead from Rogue One. So this is going to be obviously a prequel to that movie, but it's also got K2SO in it as well, the loyal, snarky droid that you saw in that movie too, and that's going to start filming here in early 2020 as well. So I don't know release date on that. They haven't announced that, but I would imagine late in 2020. Again, not a whole lot of details on it, but we just know it's coming.
Yeah, and I wonder, hopefully they do more than just, obviously The Mandalorian is not established character, so it'd be interesting, hopefully they do more kind of new characters instead of just doing spin-offs or prequels to characters we know. Because one of the problems with Star Wars is I think we've discussed this times, they don't, in terms of the filmed medium, they tend to stick very familiar stuff instead of branching out and seeing some of the more interesting stuff, and going back in time, and they tend to stay in the same kind of what, 40, 50, 60-year time span.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how people have been wanting an Old Republic show or movie or whatever the heck for a very long time, so they can do that.
Yeah, and for a while there, a lot of people were thinking that that was going to be the film series that was being done by the guys who did Game of Thrones, because they had a deal with Lucasfilm to start production of that, but then
That
they
went down
backed out
too.
once they got that giant contract with Netflix. So they say it was because of, artistic differences, that standard reason of
Scheduling
why people,
conflicts.
yeah, drop out of projects, but that was rumored to be an Old Republic series. So that's no longer happening. Supposedly, the Rian Johnson trilogy is still a thing. As of just a few months ago, Rian Johnson tweeted that it's still a go. They haven't been working on it much because he's been full on with the Knives Out production and release of that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that as long as it stays on the slate. And then Kevin Feige of Marvel fame is signed up to develop a Star Wars movie. He pitched an idea to Kathleen Kennedy, and she said, okay, go for it. And that's apparently coming as well.
Okay, so why don't we jump into Rise of Skywalker? A note for people who somehow aren't aware, even though I doubt anybody listening to this is not aware of this. Carrie Fisher is technically in this. I did air quotes that you can't see. She's technically in this. As far as I'm aware, you can correct me, Andrew, if I'm wrong, I believe. Because originally the plan was loosely, the first of the new trilogies, the first film would be kind of Han Solo focused, sort of. None of these people would be the main characters, obviously, but they would be kind of centered around him. First movie centered kind of around Han Solo. The second movie centered kind of around Luke. And then the third idea that I think Kathleen Kennedy did say was going to happen was the third film would be centered around Leia. Now, obviously, when Carrie Fisher died before they filmed any of third movie in this new trilogy, that kind of threw a wrench in the works. Originally, they said they weren't going to use her likeness or whatever. They eventually changed their minds. Carrie Fisher's family gave the okay to use her likeness, and they've used, I don't know if it's from both movies or just one of them, but they've used unused footage and I think lines from one or both of Last Jedi and Force Awakens. And
I think it was just The Force Awakens, because there was a lot of
cutscenes.
When Harrison Ford had his accident, when the door shut down on his legs and broke one of his legs, and they did a shutdown of development production. They went back and they actually did a pretty large rewrite of the script, and so a lot of the scenes that were originally shot with Carrie Fisher were removed from that final version of the script, and that's the stuff that they're using for this.
Yeah, and they rotoscoped her out of those scenes, put her in new scenes. I think possibly changed her costume. I know they said they did some stuff with her hair and did some other stuff to make it match, and they actually did a very good job. I mean, if you don't, I was looking for like the kind of lines and flaws in it and stuff, and I didn't really see any. I'd be interested to talk to somebody who maybe doesn't know that Carrie Fisher had passed away or something like that, or just somebody who's not a person like me who's going to be looking for that type of stuff, and to see if they think anything is odd about Leia's part in the movie, which they do. I mean, considering what they had to work with, they do, I think, a pretty good job with her. But for me, it is kind of obvious that they're kind of writing around what they have to work with, and people are talking around what lines Carrie Fisher had said. And
but I felt like they did good enough. Right, it's not obvious.
No, and
like the lines that she says, they work them in a way that I feel fits in the scene.
Yeah, it's not like she's saying something totally irrelevant to anything you could possibly have to do with Rise of Skywalker.
Right. I really like to eat fish. We were not talking about dinner, but thanks, Princess Leia. But yeah, I thought that they did a decent enough job of fitting her in. Yeah, but like you said, we're looking for it, right?
Yeah, and I thought what they were going to do was, because I heard about the old footage thing, which I didn't know 100% if they were going to do that or if they were going to change their minds, but I thought they were going to do that, but a mixture of kind of what we saw in Rogue One or stuff that you see in stuff like that Tron movie sequel and stuff, where you have another actor with the actor they are playing's face kind of digitized onto them. I don't think they've done any of that. I think anytime it's probably someone else. Well, it's always somebody else. Certain times there's probably somebody else at least standing in for her or something. There is sometimes when her back's to the camera where I'm sure it was somebody else or whatever. But I don't think they ever used, as far as I can tell, they never saw any. I didn't even see any like digital manipulation of her face. So I think it was all just what they had. Again, the kind of reusing the footage that they had and the lines they had to work with. They used a lot of shots of her like kind of staring kind of in an emotional or important manner because they don't, which again works well enough. I mean, again, it is kind of limited, but again, they do pretty well with what they have. So in terms of that, I think they use Leia in the way I thought they would probably have used her if Carrie Fisher hadn't passed away before they filmed it. Except it's just less because they don't actually have her, so they can't film everything that they would want. So they kind of substitute other characters for where she probably would have gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, but they do more of her arc than I thought they would possibly be able to do in this movie. They actually make it work pretty well. Obviously, it would have been better to have her more front and center, which they probably would have done if she had lived. And again, some characters obviously are taking her place for scenes that she obviously would have had. Anyway, so they deal with that pretty well, and props to J.J. Abrams and everybody involved in making that work. So for Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, the plot is, and this is really not a spoiler because it's been all over the advertising, and they reveal it in the opening credit crawl. Palpatine is back, and Kylo, who's in full emo mode at this point, finds the planet that Palpatine is hiding out on, and Palpatine wants Kylo to kill Rey. I mean, obviously, Kylo is a bit conflicted about that, and there is some secret about Rey that the Emperor has, which we will probably discuss at some point. Anyway, Palpatine has some sort of secret information about Rey that he tells Kylo, that Kylo is also kind of holding over the head of Rey throughout the movie. So he's trying to find Rey and kill her. In the meantime, Rey, Poe, Finn, and the kind of rest of the Resistance are trying to find where Palpatine is so they can defeat him and finally defeat the First Order. But there seems to be a massive fleet that the Emperor has constructed that may destroy the Resistance before they can do that. But those three are planet hopping with Chewie and C-3PO to find planets with the help of a research book or something like that that Luke had when he was also trying to find this planet. I don't know why you're laughing.
Your synopsis is spot on in many ways.
Yes.
Not just the facts that you're telling, but the
way
that you are telling it.
Yes. So anyway, that is the basic. I mean, obviously there's some other stuff going on with sort of Leia and Kylo and some other stuff that goes on with the other characters, kind of, with Poe and his sort of backstory and then meeting a woman he kind of has a love interest in. I don't know. Before we get into more specifics and talk about maybe certain topics and actors and character, plot points, whatever, what are your kind of initial feelings about this movie, and especially since it is the last of this trilogy and supposedly the last of this ongoing episodes that started with episode 4 back in 1977.
I kept thinking throughout this movie, I thought several times, well, that was a missed opportunity. And I don't want to come across saying that I really disliked the movie. I really loved parts of it. Overall, I'm still trying to put together how I feel about it in its entirety. I think the biggest reason why I think that there were missed opportunities is because of how they were marketing it. And they kept talking about how it's not just the end of this trilogy, but the end of a trilogy of trilogies. And it really only felt like it was the end of 2 trilogies.
You're acting like they maybe ignored one of them. I wonder which one it was.
Yeah, and to me, I think that's a big missed opportunity.
And that's not to say, okay, obviously we're talking about the prequels. That's not to say that there's nothing of the prequels in there. Obviously, there's certain stuff with Palpatine.
Right.
They reference.
Right.
Without giving too much away, there's certain things that you hear at certain points that are references to, very obvious references to the prequels and stuff, and work as what those are. I'm trying to be very vague on purpose. So they don't completely ignore them, but yes, they don't talk about them as much as you would want. To be fair, I'm trying to think of how ways they could maybe reference them more. It's a little bit more difficult with the prequels.
So I think that part was really apparent to me at the very end of the movie. And I can't say a whole lot about it because we aren't doing spoilers, but I feel like there could have been some very easy visual references that would have been, oh, okay, they are acknowledging that those movies existed. And like I said, there were some very subtle references to it. A line is directly lifted from Revenge of the Sith, one of the very first lines in the movie. But I felt that there's a lot of things that happen that really don't matter, not just to all of the movies, but to this movie in particular. There were some really strange script choices that happened where one thing would happen and then 15 minutes later, basically they undid that thing that happened. And I don't know. But again, I'm looking forward to seeing it again. I'm expecting that the next time I see it, it will make more sense to me. But yeah, I felt it was very... George Lucas has a history of his directing style being faster and more intense. And I feel like JJ took that to heart in this movie because it is very fast and very intense and doesn't ever have time to breathe.
Yeah, there's a lot. I noticed that too. There isn't much. It's pretty not that. I mean, there are quieter scenes and blah blah blah, but does feel in a way that it's constantly moving. It does feel like a lot of action, which in some cases I think is bad because it doesn't feel like there's enough character stuff there. And really,
Right.
ignoring the action stuff, I don't think there's a lot of character stuff there. I know I've heard recently that people were complaining for lack of, not for lack, but to use a nice word, about Finn in Last Jedi not having an arc, and again, I'm using air quotes, and one, I think that's bull, but two, if they don't think he had an arc in that movie, he certainly doesn't have one in this movie, because he's really, as far as I can tell, exactly the same from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. Poe, kind of, in the smallest way imaginable, maybe sort of, if you really look for it, has an arc, even though I think it's almost kind of the same as what was in Last Jedi, sort of. Lando's in the movie. He could have had an arc, because one of his things he says when you first see him is that, oh, I don't fly anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be, oh, I thought, oh, they'll develop that and stuff, and they don't. They just kind of forget about that. Eventually he starts flying again with no real character development of that at all. But really in person to really have an arc in this, okay, I guess two people. Rey does, and Kylo does.
Yeah, and I think at this point, those are the only two characters that I have ever really cared about in this sequel trilogy. I had questions about Finn and where he comes from, what his backstory is. But to be honest, if you go back and look at the history of The Force Awakens, Poe was supposed to die in the first act. He was not supposed to come back and save the day at Maz Kanata's castle. And that's one of the reasons why he has no arc in that movie, is because he wasn't supposed to be an enduring character. And then Rian Johnson gave him a really significant arc in The Last Jedi. But yeah, the only two characters that are really focused on in this trilogy, and especially in this movie, are Rey and Kylo Ren, and all the storylines that happen in this movie with the other characters, Finn and Poe mainly. It really feels like they were written there because they're like, well, we got to have something for these characters to do.
To me, I didn't really think, oh, we have to give them something to do. Because, I mean, I think we both agreed that for Last Jedi, that was kind of the problem with Finn's character, is that his storyline, while maybe could have some significance to, I don't know, character story, message, theme, stuff, did seem like he was just, what he was doing in that was just to give him something to do, which is a thing I do have a problem with Rian Johnson and that movie, even though I do love that movie a lot. And this one, I didn't really feel that. I mean, I feel like what they're doing in it is fine, and they're helping out Rey, and they're being useful, and they are helping the plots, and they are doing useful things. It's just that that's all they're doing. They're there to help the plot. But again, there's no character there for them to work with. They're helping the story, but that's all they're there for. They're not there to... There's no acting there. No, there's acting, but there's nothing really for the actors to sink their teeth into in terms of a part, which I find really kind of funny, because I know John Boyega was looking forward to going in the direction that apparently Abrams wanted to go with Finn's character, which I am totally clueless what that even was, because there is no direction for Finn's character.
It was almost like they started to try to go there, but it never resolved itself.
Yeah, and I thought they were going to go stuff about his family and stuff, because I know I didn't look anything up about the movie. I only saw, I think, one trailer, and then I kind of just blocked out the rest of it until I saw the movie. I did know there was a black female character in the movie, so I thought, oh, she would be related to Poe or something.
You mean Finn?
Sorry, to Finn, sorry. But they don't really go that direction, which is kind of fine, because I'd be kind of annoyed if the only other main black character in the series was somehow related to Finn randomly. But yeah,
although there's that one short segment there at the very end.
Yeah, oh, I'm so glad they didn't really go... I mean, they hint at what you're talking about, but they don't really go full, because I was like, oh, come on. Really? Right. So, yeah, that's one of my big problems with it, is there's not a lot of character. And part of the problem, too, is that the two characters we do really focus on and who do get arcs, Rey and Kylo, the arcs they have are pretty much stuff we've seen before in the other movies. Kylo's stuff is something we've kind of already seen before. His arc, I won't say what happens to him, but his stuff is kind of something we've already seen. Rey's stuff throughout this trilogy has kind of been fighting the dark side, blah, 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 which is what we saw with Luke in the original trilogy. I'm not saying you can never do that, like with these movies or with maybe one of the TV shows they do or whatever, you know, again, with that Obi-Wan show, if he's fighting, going to a dark place, that's fine, but you still have to make something new about it. You can't just rehash what you had before. Because again, if you're going to do that, I should just watch New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi again. What is the point of me watching this if you're not going to add anything new to it, which is kind of the problem, is they don't really add anything new to Rey's storyline. It's just kind of all recycled stiff.
Yeah, it's almost just a conclusion of their arc from The Last Jedi, where that movie really started that arc, and at the end it seemed like there was a resolution, and then this one just kind of took it a couple steps further. There's not an arc really from beginning to end if you look at just this movie, but I feel like if you look at, especially from The Last Jedi to the end of this movie, that feels like a singular arc, but there isn't really much. Well, I guess especially with Rey, there's not a whole lot of arc with Rey's character in this movie. I feel like Kylo Ren has more of an arc in this movie than Rey does.
I think Abrams kind of used what he did in Force Awakens and sort of what Rian Johnson did in The Last Jedi, mostly fine with Kylo in this movie. But yeah, it's just not interesting enough, I think, to maintain the whole movie. And then two characters I think were underused. One, the Emperor, without getting too much into him. He's the main.
Interesting.
He's kind of the main. Well, he's the main villain, but again, the problem is they're doing what they always do with the Emperor, and they're not really giving him anything more. They don't expand on his character. Did you say they vaguely explain how he's alive?
They don't explain it at all. I wouldn't even say vaguely.
The only thing I could possibly say is that power that Kylo kind of has that he uses with Rey. Maybe.
I don't think that's it. I have a theory of what it is, but
it is kind of weak. It almost felt like, well, I don't have a good reason for how he survived falling down a pit and the Death Star exploding. Why they couldn't have just used some material. I know it's not canon anymore, but they still could have used material from like Dark Empire or something, which would have been fine. I thought they were going to go with at the beginning when they first introduced him, and then they don't use those ideas at all, which would have been fine. And then another character who was underused, and I've talked about before, and I do like that they gave 3PO some more to do in this movie, especially since it's the last movie. It is nice for him to have something to do. It's the last one. Yeah. Give him something good to do so he can go on a good note, blah, blah, blah. But again, if you were to watch these three films, not have seen the prequel trilogy, especially if you hadn't seen the original trilogy, you would have no idea that R2-D2 is supposed to be important. Because he's for story reasons, I'm okay with him not being in Force Awakens hardly at all. For story reasons, that's fine. Last Jedi, they could have given him more to do. And this one, I thought they were going to give him more to do. But finally, I don't know why they keep separating C-3PO and R2-D2 in these movies.
Big mistake.
Yeah, because it's like, again, the Force Awakens, fine. C-3PO isn't even in that movie hardly at all. Anyway, it's fine. But as soon as he's conscious, it's almost like, God rest his soul, it's almost like Ken Baker is still alive and Anthony Daniels still does not want to have scenes with him because he just... That's what it feels like. It's like Anthony Daniels is like, I just don't want to have scenes with R2-D2. It's like, why couldn't R2-D2 just go with them? I mean, BB-8 doesn't even get much to do, and he's like the replacement R2-D2 in these films.
Yeah.
But especially since it's the last one, give R2 something to do. He does nothing in the movie.
Right, and that's one of my biggest issues is they add characters that aren't necessary and don't give the established characters enough screen time. You know, like, why add
a new droid character?
It does absolutely nothing.
He does kind of help them at some point.
Yeah,
he does. But
that could have easily been done a different way.
Well, I know, and it could have actually been because as you were thinking about saying that, I was thinking about it. They could have done that with R2, since Luke was trying to find this planet. The way that they used this other droid, they could have used him. He could have had something in his memory banks that could have done the same thing.
Right. Or he could have plugged into that ship and retrieved the data from the ship data banks. I mean,
But they do add certain characters. Like there's a character that's not related to Poe, but is connected to Poe that they don't really do much with. Again, there's a black female character who they introduce, who is mostly fine. I think if they hadn't tried to give her a connection to Finn, and she was just a character who was helping them out, it would have been fine. But they try to give her a connection to Finn that they really don't develop at all, so it seems kind of pointless.
This movie would have been exactly the same without her in it.
Well, they do need her they get those creatures that are useful in the climax.
Do they? Do they?
Well, they can't just... Anyway. I will say one thing that was very kind of just weird. I heard he was going to be in the movie, and then I just had totally forgotten about it. But Dominic Monaghan, who people would know from Lost and from Lord of the Rings, he plays Merry in one of the Hobbits in Lord of the Rings, is in this, which is fine. He's a fine actor. But the problem I have with it is his part is very, very small. I think he's in one location the entire movie. And I think he's too... Not that he's a big-named actor or anything, but he's too well-known of an actor, I think, for as small of a part as he has. It would be like if you have a prominent character actor who just randomly you just cut to him, a shot of him, with no introduction. It's just kind of like, what? It just seems like you should have more of an introduction and more to do considering the status of an actor he is.
And that's another character where I feel like they are adding that character, but at the same time not giving as much attention to Rose when
Yeah, I was gonna get
Rose
to that,
is constantly standing in frame while he is talking. Why not just give that stuff to her? And throughout the movie, those kinds of things are happening that I'm seeing on screen, where there's these new characters that I guess they feel like it's a new movie. They have to introduce new characters, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, something that
Felt like they were all pointless.
Yeah, I mean, again, it would be fine if, again, one, they weren't doing what you said, where they're sidelining main characters
Right.
for that, and two, if they weren't, I forget what the other point was, but they could have made that work. Again, part of the problem, especially again with like Dominic Monaghan and maybe some of the other actors, is if they had lesser known actors in those parts, I wouldn't notice it as much. It would just be this random character, this random resistance person who's giving his opinion about whatever. But the way they do it doesn't really work. It does seem like new characters just for the heck of new characters. We should talk about Kelly Marie Tran though, because so Rose in this movie has very little to do, which.
Very little.
To be fair, I don't know the reasons behind that. She is a character who was, as far as I know, created by Rian Johnson for that, for Last Jedi, so Abrams did not create her. So I would hope that he was not caving into the a-hole people who are harassing her and complaining about her character. Which, again, for people who don't remember the last podcast, I don't love her character. I don't love the performance. I just don't agree with the harassment she got for that, which she didn't deserve, because it's a movie and people can relax. So hopefully he wasn't caving into that. I'm hoping it's just that he didn't have much for the story he wanted to do. He didn't have much for her to do, which I don't want him to force her to have something to do just to give her something to do, because again, then that is distracting. So hopefully that was just he didn't have much for her to do and he tried to use her where he could. Now again, like you said, he could have used her more and just given her some of the stuff that new characters had that she could have said, and it would have been fine. I don't know why he didn't do that. I'm not so terribly surprised she has a small part, because I noticed, at least in the trailer I saw and promotional material that I did see, which wasn't a lot because I tried to avoid most of it for the movie, I didn't see much of her in it. So I think I even asked you one point privately, like, is she even going to be in the movie? Because I saw nothing of her. In the first trailer, again, which is the only one I saw, I don't think they show her at all in it. So I was wondering if she was even going to be in it. And so when I eventually saw it, I wasn't surprised that she had such a small part. I mean,
yeah, when they first released the poster, she wasn't on the poster either.
Which, again, is fair. She doesn't have much to do.
Right. Let's talk about what we do like.
Yeah, let's talk, because we are bitching and moaning a lot about stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we talk about some of the stuff we do like?
Anytime that Rey and Kylo Ren are on screen together, I love. I feel like their dynamic is really strong. I like the story stuff that was happening around their characters. I remember the first time I had a discussion about The Force Awakens, I remember saying that I felt that Kylo Ren would end up being the most interesting villain of the Star Wars movies, and I'm proud to say that I was right. I find the stuff that he does in this movie to be really, really interesting, and I think that the relationship, if you can call it that, between him and Rey is fascinating and compelling, and something that we hadn't seen in the Star Wars movies before, and I just think that those two actors are stronger together. Well, I feel like Daisy Ridley is stronger when she is interacting with Adam Driver than she is when she's not. Adam Driver is just a powerhouse and will someday win an Oscar. So yeah, I think anytime that those two are interacting, yeah, I'm fully engaged.
I would like to say that I still like Daisy Ridley as an actress. I think she's very talented and probably one of the best actors the franchise as a whole has had. But yes, Adam Driver is terrific. I've loved him more and more as I've seen him in different stuff. He is a great actor, and he's, I think, a subtly great actor. He's not terribly show, and not as much in this. He's a bit more, I don't want to say over the top. That's maybe a bit of a disservice, but he's bigger in this movie than he has been in some other movies. But he doesn't show off that he's really good. He's just really good. I'm fine with Daisy Ridley by herself or with him. I was not as compelled by their relationship as you were, but I would say maybe part of the problem I wonder if the reason why you like Daisy Ridley more when she's with Kylo, at least in this movie, is maybe because he's the only other person who is given much to do. So she's just kind of...
That could be.
Because all the other characters, and I don't want to slip into bitching more, but they're there to help her story and the plots, but they're not really giving her other stuff to work with. They're just bouncing off of what she's doing.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. I think that it's not so much that I like her as an actor better when she's around Adam Driver. It's more that I like the stuff that's happening in the story better when those two are interacting than what's happening when they're not interacting. The stuff when she's with Finn and Poe, that stuff just wasn't as engaging to me as when those two were interacting. For the most part, I unsurprisingly enjoyed the score by John Williams. This will be his last time as composer for Star Wars movies. I did enjoy it for the most part, although I felt like it was lacking
a standout theme for me.
Yes, it was a lot more subtle than what we're used to in the past. Usually there's at least one moment where I'm able to latch on to just letting, and I think it's a symptom of this movie as a whole is, like I said earlier, there's no time to breathe. There's a lot of action and a lot of talking, but there isn't anything where JJ just let the music tell the story, which typically happens in a Star Wars movie where it's just the music that's driving the emotion of the scene. And I don't feel like that happened.
It happens a little bit at the end. Like tradition, there's not a lot of dialogue in the final moments in scene or 2 or 3 in the movie, which is, I think, probably the only time that actually happens. Without saying what they are, I do like some of the cameos that they have. I know sometimes it can be a bit like
actor cameos or character cameos.
Mostly character cameos. I mean, like to speak of John Williams, he does appear briefly in the movie as a character and stuff.
Which I did a double take. I saw him and then I looked at the friend I was sitting next to, who was also a big John Williams fan, and I looked at him and we both had this look like, yep, that was him.
Yeah,
we were both looking at each other to confirm, but because it's very quick.
Yeah, it's very quick. They might have an establishing shot of him, but then there's like one very quick close up of him. But no, I'm mostly talking about character cameos. There's some brief character cameos, which I am fine with. I don't think they did it to the point where it was masturbatory or something. It was, I think, fine, especially since it is supposedly the last one. I think it's fine to do some of that. Again, I don't think they went overboard with it. I can't really think of a time where it's terribly out of place. It's not like C-3PO showing up in Rogue One, where it's kind of just like they want to do it just to have it. It makes sense. And okay, one character says, I'll bring this up because it would be kind of awkward to mention it in a spoiler section. For people, again, I will put something on the screen to say this is something different if you don't want to hear this. I do wonder how much they had to bother Dennis Lawson to come back as Wedge for the 5 seconds that he's in it.
Yeah. I don't think that they had to bother him much, and I'll tell you why. In early April at Star Wars Celebration in Chicago, which was his first appearance at a Star Wars or any sort of convention to sign autographs and that kind of stuff, and the response from fans that he got was so overwhelming that, I mean, he was having a genuinely good time just interacting with fans. And I think that experience might have pulled him back in to say, okay, sure, I'll do 5 seconds if you write me a check. I don't see them saying, we're going to pay Dennis Lawson a ton of money to come in for 5 seconds. He didn't do anything to, like, it was not necessary.
No.
His appearance was not necessary at all. And
it was nice to see. But,
it was very nice to see. I'm glad that he's in it. But that's really what makes me think that he was on board to do it because he wanted to, not because they were paying him, whatever amount of money it would take to get somebody in a cockpit.
Yeah.
FYI, Lucasfilm, if you're listening, I will sit in a cockpit for $0.
No, he will build the cockpit. He will build the cockpit, and he will tow it to the set, and he will shoot. He will work the camera. He will do everything if you
whatever it takes.
And he means whatever it takes. Anyway,
whatever
anyway.
it takes.
Before we move on to other things, we can talk about some of the other character cameos stuff. Most of them are voiceover stuff. Near the end of the movie, they have, Mace Windu. They very obviously have Liam Neeson because you can't miss Liam Neeson's voice.
Right.
They do have Hayden Christensen as Anakin. They have Ewan McGregor. I saw that they used archive footage of Alec Guinness. I did not.
I heard him. Yeah, I heard him say it's basically what they did with The Force Awakens. When you hear him in there, you hear him say Rey. Right. It's basically the exact same line.
Okay, because I tried to look for that, and all I could hear was Ewan McGregor saying Rey, so I couldn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
They also, one thing that was neat was they got a couple of folks from the cartoons.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
Did you see for sure if they had Ashley Eckstein in there? She played Ahsoka.
Obviously. I know that because my wife said, because there's a couple female voices, which I did not, one of them I could guess who she was, the other one I didn't know, and she said it was, what's her name, the main female Jedi in the Clone Wars show.
Yep. So that would be Ashley Eckstein. Yep.
Yeah, Ashley Eckstein. Yep.
And then
Jennifer Hale.
Jennifer
Hale as
Jennifer Hale Luminara.
Sakura.
Ayla Secura, yeah. Which, I mean, that's not who played Ayla Secura in the prequels, but they had Freddie Prinze Jr., who voices Jedi in the Rebels cartoon.
I was wondering who he played because I
Kanan.
was like, why is he in this?
Yeah, so that was cool, but that was, again, one of those moments where it's like, well, that's a missed opportunity. Where are the Force ghosts?
That's okay.
Just give me the Force ghosts. That's what everybody wants. Just give me the Force ghosts.
It would be kind of a problem, a little bit of a problem with the characters. You would have to have different actors playing maybe the cartoon, the animated characters, and then maybe have those actors voice them. Well, because does Freddie Prinze... No, I'm just saying they would have to at least do that because obviously I don't know. I'm assuming Freddie Prinze Jr. probably doesn't look anything like his character,
right? And neither does Ashley Eckstein. But still, like Hayden Christensen, Ewan McGregor, like, why?
Okay.
Why?
Okay, I will say this.
Why miss that opportunity?
Okay, I will say this. One, I did think they would use more Force ghosts in the movie. I did. They do use some Force ghosts. One should be very obvious. I did think they were going to use more Force ghosts, especially since I did hear a rumor that Hayden Christensen was going to be in the movie in some capacity. I thought he would have a bigger part, like actually talk to Kylo or something, which would have been nice. Or maybe just tell the Emperor to shut the hell up for once in his life. But I'll say this. Hayden Christensen you can maybe get away with as a Force ghost because you could maybe say, oh, he really died when he became Vader. That's why his Force ghost looks like Anakin instead of the age he was when he physically died.
Right.
Ewan McGregor, the problem is we've seen him as a Force ghost and he always looks like Alec Guinness. Why would he suddenly look like Ewan McGregor? You would have to use like stock footage of Alec Guinness somehow.
They do amazing things with makeup, my friend. And there's actually a picture out there, you can Google it, where it's a composite of Alec Guinness and Ewan McGregor, and it's basically Ewan McGregor's face put on Alec Guinness's head from A New Hope, and it's kind of creepy how similar they look. And it's a Force ghost. You can't even hardly tell who it is. Like, we would get the point, right? No, I don't know. I just felt like that was a big missed opportunity, especially at that moment, because that's the big, like, we're not going to be able to avoid comparing this end of an era with another end of an era that came out earlier this year in Endgame. In Endgame, the big climactic moment where everybody comes together and it's a great moment. This movie, it's like there's this big climactic moment and she uses the Force and calls all these other Jedi to help her. It's so lackluster.
I thought
it's just like hear some voices and then
I enjoyed it more than you did. I will say yes, they could have used them more, and using Force Ghosts there, which I hadn't thought about, would have been nice to have them all show up, and again would have helped tie some stuff in with the prequels. I would say there might be a bit of a problem with because I thought they established that only a very small amount of Jedi have figured out the Force Ghost stuff. So to have all of them, like Mace Windu, who had no...
So that makes it even easier. Makes it easier and harder because according to canon, Qui-Gon was the first to really do it of the known Jedi. So
which they hint about in the prequels a little bit.
Yep, and it's expanded further in the Clone Wars. And then he's the one who taught Yoda how to do it. And then Yoda and Qui-Gon taught Obi-Wan to do it. No idea how Hayden Christensen, Anakin Skywalker knew how to do it. So if you have the voices, but then you've got 4 Jedi right there that you could have done. Yeah. Plus, you got Luke, and I don't know.
And, okay, this is a big spoiler, but we're already in the section anyway. And Kylo never comes back as a Force ghost. They have him disappear, and they have him disappear, then they never go back to that, ever.
Another missed opportunity where at the end, right, I get it, like, at the homestead, and you see Luke and Leia, and she takes on their name, but...
Maybe have all the other more Force ghosts.
Yeah.
At least have the Skywalker family, at least.
Right, like have Ben there too, maybe have Yoda. I just am like, that was probably the biggest missed opportunity to me was, where's the Force Ghost?
I would say...
Give us a reunion.
Well, yeah, okay, so I do like that some of the characters came back. Yes, they could have been used more. And actually, I thought that Luke was going to have a bigger part than he does. He only has really 2 scenes in the movie, one of which he doesn't say anything. But yeah, I thought, they would use him more as a Force Ghost, especially since they do use some of his dialogue at least in the first trailer, so I thought he would be more prominent.
And especially since the last time we saw him, he was telling Ben...
I just saw about that, yeah.
See you around, kid, right?
Yeah.
No, he won't.
Yeah, you never see...
Apparently, he'll never see him again.
I thought, maybe in the Force Ghost Afterlife or something, I guess.
Maybe.
Whatever they do in their spare time.
Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Let's talk about old Sheev Palpatine. This is where I start to get conflicted. as you know, The Last Jedi, I think, is a superb film.
Yes.
And I love almost everything about it.
Yeah, we both have problems with it, but we both like it. Yep.
One of the biggest things that I love about it is the message that
Oh,
anybody
yeah.
can be a Jedi. Anybody can rise up and be a hero.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter where you come from, who, what your lineage is. Anybody can rise up and do amazing things. This movie, by saying that Rey is somehow Palpatine's. I can't even believe I'm saying that. I can't say it with a straight face. Somehow Palpatine's granddaughter.
Yeah.
Really undoes the main message of the previous movie. Now, you could spin it and you could say, well, it does take that away, but it adds that, again, regardless of your lineage, you could rise above your ancestry, right?
But that's what they do with Luke.
Better. But
that's what they do with Luke, though. That's my very problem with it, because I thought about that too. Right. But that's what they do with Luke in the original stuff. That's nothing new.
Exactly. That's where I'm conflicted, because it's the main crux of this movie, but it undoes what I love most about the previous movie.
Yeah, and it's not... I said this in the last one, I'm pretty sure. I don't think it was cut out. I was saying this more in relation to if she had been related to Luke or Leia or Han or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think it still applies to Palpatine as well, because I had heard rumors of her being, I think, maybe his daughter or something, not the granddaughter, I think. But I think it still applies my previous complaints of, it doesn't add anything. When they had that reveal of when Kylo tells Rey that, oh, you're her granddaughter, I felt absolutely nothing. I wasn't even that enraged by that point, because I kind of prepared myself, even though I was begging them not to do it. I felt absolutely nothing on it. It wasn't interesting at all. If, again, maybe they hadn't done this such a similar thing with Luke in the original trilogy, it might have been fine. And then they do have to, it's even kind of annoying because they have to even retcon kind of what they had. They almost get away with it, where, Kylo says they were nobodies because they had to. But the problem was, he also says, I never lied to you.
They chose to.
But he also says, I never lied to you. It's like, well, yeah, you did, because you also said that they sold her for gambling money, which apparently they didn't. So you did lie to her. So it's just obvious, like, again, it's part of the, like, how did the Emperor survive? We're just not going to say. What about this line that contradicts something we're establishing? We're just going to ignore it, because I want to do what I originally planned to do, and screw what came before it. We're just going to ignore it, and not be more of a creative writer and try to spin some of your own ideas or work with what you have and do something new. I'm just going to kind of retrofit my ideas onto this because that's what I want to do. It's really lazy and frustrating.
I am not sure if I believe that this is what JJ had in mind when he worked on The Force Awakens, mainly because that's not the type of creative person that JJ is. He's a great asker of questions, presenter of questions, but he never has any answers. And there's lots of that in this movie too. For instance, like, how is Palpatine alive? Never answered. I'm guessing he's a clone. I'm guessing.
Well, I was reading some stuff about him being like, that's like his corpse that's reanimated when he sucks the energy out of them or something. Because he does look very, he doesn't have pupils and all that mumbo-jumbo.
But again, like, no explanation. Well, which I guess there doesn't really need to be an explanation. I don't need to have everything spelled out. But
it is kind of...
that's a pretty big retcon for you to just say, okay,
he survived somehow.
He's back.
Yeah, I mean, and again, they had... Again, in Dark Empire, for people who haven't read that or listened to it or whatever, that takes place after the events of Return of the Jedi. It's an expanded universe thing where Palpatine comes back and he does stuff with Luke, blah, blah, blah. And the reason they give for that is that I don't think just made one clone, he's made multiple clones of himself. I think in the case that he somehow gets killed. Now, obviously, again, Dark Empire is not canon anymore, but they could have sort of used that idea,
right.
And it would have been fine.
I think that's the
you do see
the
like
basis of this, right? Because he's saying that he created Snoke and you see clones of Snoke.
Yeah, in jars.
So I'm assuming that this is some cloning facility or something that the Emperor had set up back in the prequel era after the whole clone army. Right? He took the Camino tech and made his own.
And that would have been a great tie-in.
And all those, whoever those people are in cloaks in that amphitheater, like, are those all like, who are those people? Are they clones? Like, I didn't even know they were there, and all of a sudden they start chanting. I was like,
that was actually kind of creepy. I do kind of like that you just kind of see all these people there.
And the whole setting is very creepy. Palpatine is incredibly creepy. The way he's shot with the lightning and like, he's very creepy. The way he's on that big mechanical arm and everything, he's very creepy. I just want to know why he's there. The other thing that I keep coming back to is, and I see this a lot with a lot of my friends who are kind of in the same boat as me in this movie. They're talking about how like it's very obvious that this trilogy was not planned out. It was we're going to do episode 7 and then we're going to do episode 8 and then we're going to do episode 9. There's not like, okay, let's plan out this trilogy. How do we want it to end? It's very evident in this movie that did not happen. I feel like we forget that that's how all of the Star Wars movies have been made. There's never been a plan. I guess you could say maybe the prequels, like you knew that Anakin was going to turn into Darth Vader, but the original trilogy, none of it was planned out.
Not even while they were working on Empire, he didn't have like a return. I mean, didn't he have some sort of like...
He didn't know that Princess Leia was Luke's sister until...
Well, didn't he have like the broad strokes or something? Like, was Vader still going to redeem himself and maybe have like the broad strokes, he just changed details of it as he went?
Maybe.
I know it's hard to tell what Lucas says.
From what I have read, I highly doubt it, especially like from the beginning. And I think that we're so used to the Marvel model now, where everything is planned out for an entire phase of movies, which includes like 7 or 8 movies. Everything is basically planned out. The overall arc of how that's going to end is all planned.
It is nowadays. I would say at the beginning they didn't, because there's certain stuff that obviously contradicts what came later.
But we now think of franchises as being that way, where everything they have a beginning, a middle, and end, and they know how it's going to end. And so when we see something like this, it's very contradictory to what I think imagine Hollywood is like, and it's not necessarily always like that.
Well, I think part of the problem is that at least with the original trilogy, if that was the case, that even after when he was doing Empire and Return of the Jedi, he still was making stuff up mostly as he went along. But I think what works, and even if he was doing that for the prequels, which I kind of doubt, that does seem the most cohesive and probably planned out of them, especially since he had something to work towards with the original trilogy, so he knew kind of where he was going. I think what helped with those movies is that you had, I mean, Lucas only directed the original movie. He didn't officially direct any the Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. He directed all and wrote all of the prequel movies. But at least with the original trilogy, he was the creative force behind all those movies. And the prequels, he was directly writing all of those movies. Right. So you had the same person doing it. Part of the problem with this is that you have totally different writers, for the most part, and totally different directors doing it. And you don't have a consistent... Because even if Lucas was making stuff up as he went along, at least the stuff he's making up matches kind of with what his aesthetic and his kind of plots and stories are. All these 3 directors, even if Colin, whatever his name is, came in and did it, they all have very different stuff, I think, wanted to do with the stuff that didn't mesh. And it really would have helped if they had a consistent writer or co-writer to keep stuff consistent.
Yeah. Well, and I always come back to J.J. Abrams was a producer on The Last Jedi. So, like, he could have, if he had an idea and was like, hey, this is what I had in mind, he had the ability to do that. Maybe he did, and Lucasfilm and Rian Johnson said, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. And then he redid it when he came in. But I feel like Palpatine is so out of left field here.
Well, and the retcon that he was behind Snoke is just ridiculous. It's such an obvious turn from what they had.
It would have been easier to swallow if there was some mention of a puppet master in
behind Snoke,
The Force Awakens. And there was speculation, because if you remember in The Force Awakens, you never actually see Snoke, you just see a hologram. And there was speculation that wasn't even really what he looked like. Yeah. And that there was somebody like a Wizard of Oz behind the curtain who was pulling all the strings.
I could maybe even be more okay with it if it had not been the Emperor, and if it had been like, what's his name? That the people thought Snoke might have been, because they used that music, a similar music. Plagueis. That would have been at least interesting, because at least, one, that's a new character who would hopefully have different motivations and different...
And he was mentioned before, right? It would have been a callback to... Wait, what movies? Oh, the prequels, right? Yeah. Those exist.
Yeah, and that would have been a nice...
I mean, and I'm fine with it. I'm okay with it, right? That's what they chose to do. I'm okay with it. I'll go with it. I just don't know why.
Yeah. It
was like they didn't want, because at the end of The Last Jedi, Kylo Ren's the big bad.
Yeah.
He's the one in charge, and they wanted to have a big bad for him and Rey to fight together, and they no longer had that because Snoke was gone, and they didn't know what to do, so they were like, hey, let's just bring the Emperor back. He's the biggest bad of all.
And they could have even had, like, they fight against the First Order people or something. That could have been fine. Or they could have fought against, I mean, they finally have the Knights of Ren doing something, and they could have been fighting against them or something. Yeah, they are kind of lame. Yeah.
They go down like punks.
Yeah. I'm fine with writers not planning everything out. My thing is, one of the things I like about, not that he doesn't have flaws in his writing and directing, blah, 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 but one of the things I do like about Joss Whedon as a writer and a director is that with like Buffy and sort of with Avengers and stuff, he has certain things planned out that he might have planned out for a long period of time that he hints at very long before he introduces them, but he's still vague enough about them and vague enough about other ideas that if he can totally changes his mind, he can do that, and it's not a problem if you go back and watch the original time they're mentioned. But then there's other writers who I will mention, even though I have one specific one in mind, who will plan stuff ahead of time, and they might have a vague idea of, like one writer I know, he has the A in mind, he has C in mind, but he doesn't know exactly how they're going to get there. Problem is, there's very obvious changes that he's making as he's doing it, and he's specific enough originally that when you finally get to C, it's very obvious that he's changed his mind, and what his original idea was does not match up with what he originally wanted. That's kind of what is happening here, is that even if there was some sort of idea of this that JJ had, he was so specific, and then Rian Johnson was more specific, that when they do this, it's such an obvious turn from what they originally wanted to do if they did have that in mind, that it's just totally distracting and kind of just what the F, you know? I mean, it's... And maybe people who, again, are not like you and me, who don't analyze stuff as much as we do, won't have a problem with it, and we'll just go with it.
Like I said, I'll go with it, right? It's fine. It's fine. I'm not angry at the movie for doing it.
I'm not angry. I'm annoyed with...
I wish they had done it better. You know, and you were talking about Joss Whedon, and you know, again, you've got that one singular mind guiding the ship, which
for most of it,
they don't have.
No,
So I think that's probably what hurt this movie and subsequently this sequel trilogy the most, is not having that singular vision to guide them through.
And they could have even still done that with the three, ignoring the fact that Colin Trevor, or however you pronounce it.
Trevorrow,
if he had stayed on and also done a movie that was very different from the other two and very different in direction than the other two, it still could have worked if they had just done a very simple thing of having... Sorry that I'm being as angry and kind of sort of swearing a lot on this, but if they had just had a goddamn meeting and just said, and over the course of a few weeks or a couple months, and just said, and planned out the stuff so they could have, at the very least, compromised with what... Like, okay, JJ, I don't really want to go in that direction. I really want to do this. I think it'd be really interesting. Or Colin saying, Ryan, if we could maybe do this with your movie so that I can do this, because I think this would be really cool. And maybe there's some ideas they wouldn't get to do, but it maybe would be more cohesive and it would work better. Instead of there apparently being no communication or very little, and just, like you said, kind of just making stuff up as they go along, but in a very bad way. We're going to exit the spoiler section for the moment, since we've been in it for about like 2 hours or something. For people who are coming in now, we had a very long, more extended spoiler section than I thought. You can listen to that after you see the movie. Anyway, my biggest gripe with this movie is that Abrams does not take enough... I think it's the thing that we were afraid of when we were talking about Last Jedi, is that he doesn't take enough risks with what he has. He plays it very safe. And I think somebody said, I saw somebody who was reviewing the movie, who was just tweeting their basic thoughts about it, said that it was kind of mechanical almost. And it is kind of mechanical in terms of what he's doing and how things are unfolding. It's not... He's doing what's safe and what's tried and what's tested.
Yeah, I feel like he tries to do things that, and he even said, I heard him say in interviews, that what Rian Johnson did with The Last Jedi inspired him to take risks in this movie that he wouldn't have normally taken.
Which is great, yeah.
And I think there is some stuff in here that is risky and not rote as what JJ likes to do, especially looking at like The Force Awakens, where everything is carbon copy from A New Hope. But,
or when he copies himself in like Star Trek Into Darkness. Very obviously copying himself too.
Right.
I don't know, it's not even like a reference, it's just he's copying himself.
Yeah. I think that he does take some risks in this movie. Yeah. And if he didn't take any risks, it would have just been a rehash of Return of the Jedi. Somehow he would have just redone Return of the Jedi.
And I think for the most part it's not. There is some stuff that is similar-ish, but it's... Yes, it is not as much of the Return of the Jedi as I was fearing it would be.
Yeah, so I'm curious to know what he thinks a risk is, as opposed to what I think a risk is, or even what Rian Johnson thinks a risk is, because Rian Johnson knows how to take what we assume and then turn it on its head.
I think his risks are fairly obvious most of the time, because he's a very, like, he hits you over the head. Not like in a bad way, but he's very obvious because they're very glaring. Right. This is risky, which is probably why Last Jedi is so mixed, is because he took those big risks.
Yeah, but again, I don't want to say that I hated this movie.
No,
by
I know.
Any stretch of the mean. I was entertained for 2.5 hours. I feel like it should have either been 2 hours and cut out some of the stuff that really didn't have an effect on the overall story, or it should have been a 3-hour movie and fleshed out some of the stuff that we felt was not important to make it important.
Yeah, there was stuff, without getting into it, there's a thing with Finn and Rey in the movie that is kind of mentioned a few times, but they don't do anything with it.
No,
I mean, nothing
never.
at all. I realized
Nothing at all.
I realized it after I saw the movie. I was like, that never really paid off in any way. I mean, they kept acting like it would. They kept having building material for it to finally happen, and then it's like they forgot about it by the end of the movie.
Right.
I almost wonder if there's a deleted scene where they paid it off.
But if there was, they should have removed the other stuff.
Yeah.
Like, why did that stuff
That's
stay?
a good point, because if you can't have the payoff, why have the build up for it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to be fair, you basically know what it is, but
Did we?
Probably.
I
think we probably do. Maybe that's why he doesn't have an obvious payoff. Maybe he thought it was obvious and we don't need to say it, but...
But then you should actually call that out. You should actually have a moment where he's going to say it, and then somebody says, you don't even need to say it.
I know.
Right? Like, you need to actually make it obvious so that we aren't sitting here saying there was no payoff.
And, well, yeah, again, it's kind of the same thing with Lando. There's not really a payoff for his
the whole thing that happened with 3PO, they build it up as this big, like... There's no turning back.
But they do have a Chekhov's memory.
Right?
They do have a Chekhov's R2D2 and kind of set up that they can maybe fix it. But yeah, they do kind of. Yeah, it provides some nice comic moments, I will say, that I kind of enjoyed.
Yeah, I guess. Again, that is a risk that he should have just run with.
Yeah, I do think he should have killed a character or two. And I don't like killing off characters just to kill off characters. But the only character they kill off, well, they do kill off some characters, but they're characters that when you would expect, or for certain reasons without saying who they are, kind of have to kill off. But killing off like a major character would have been really ballsy, and I think better, because it doesn't really feel like people are in danger that much, and it just doesn't, there's not much weight to it.
I mean, look at Return of the Jedi. Specifically, Harrison Ford wanted George Lucas to kill him off in that movie to give the movie stakes.
I thought they wanted him to kill him off in Empire, and they compromised or something.
No, they put him in carbonite in case they couldn't get him back. In case Harrison Ford said, yeah, no thanks, you can't pay me enough money for this. It was the same thing with A New Hope. They didn't know if they were going to be able to get Harrison Ford back. So Harrison Ford wanted to die off in Return of the Jedi to give some stakes to that final battle. But George Lucas said, no, none of the heroes are going to die. Because that's not the kind of movie that he wanted to make. He wanted to have a full-on happy ending. But anyway, I was just trying to draw a comparison between this movie and Return of the Jedi. I do feel that if they didn't want to kill off a character, there's one moment where they do something on a planet, and they say, pick a planet that they care about.
Oh, yes. I
was like, again, missed opportunity. They should have picked a planet that the audience cares about.
Okay, I'll cut this out. Hello, everyone. Future Tim here. I actually did not edit this out, and this is another spoiler section, so you have been warned. But for story reasons and emotional reasons, I was hoping it was going to be Tatooine.
I was hoping it would be Tatooine, or Naboo from the prequels, or Yavin 4, where the original base was, and Rogue One again. Pick a planet that the audience cares about. Yeah, Nobody cares about that planet that the heroes were on for 2 minutes of screen time. Nobody cares. The only person who cares is, I guess, it's to give Poe something to react to when he finds out that Zori Bliss comes back at the very end, so he's excited he's alive.
I didn't even notice.
I think that was the planet, right?
I think it was. I just didn't even remember the fact that she was. Or maybe it was either that planet or it was the planet where they found the dagger. I can't remember. This is how memorable.
That's another problem I have with this movie is how much planet hopping they do. 3 planets. That's how many new planets should be in a Star Wars movie, and there are like 7 in this. I don't know.
Well, and part of the problem is that people who are listening to this can probably tell it's very hard for us to even remember the planets because they aren't that memorable. I can remember the species and stuff that are on the planets, but
I'm pretty sure it's Kijimi. So the planet that means something to them is the planet that means something to Poe. Rey and Finn had never been there before. Poe's the only one that has any history there. So if Kylo Ren was looking to destroy a planet that Poe cares about, I guess he succeeded, but nobody else cares about that planet. Pick a planet that the audience cares about. That moment is supposed to be emotional, not just for the characters, but for the audience. If the audience is not emotional in that scene, you have failed at your job of writing the script.
I'm assuming they couldn't pick a certain planet because of something that happens later, but yeah.
There are plenty of planets that they could have chosen, and it would have been impactful.
You could have done Naboo, and that would have been fine too. Okay, so I feel like we should talk about positives again because we are complaining a lot. Okay,
We are.
I just want to
Yeah.
re-stress, and Andrew has said it multiple times. I don't hate this movie. I know it really comes off like I hate this movie.
Yeah.
I'm annoyed tremendously by certain stuff that they do in the movie. I don't hate it. For the most part, I think my opinions on it, and I forget if I mentioned this up top, I think it's fine with some nice, awesome stuff in it. I wish it could have been better, but
Yeah.
part of the problem is that I think it is so safe in a lot of ways. It's quite forgettable as a movie. It's not that it's bad, it's just very middle of the road with some, again, awesome stuff in it, but those can't boost it enough.
I love all the big mythological stuff that is in it. Again, all the stuff with Rey and Kylo and those big moments I really, really like.
Well,
the stuff that they have to do to get there, I'm not so keen on, but it's big and feels like a myth, which is what these are supposed to be, is a modern day myth, and it just, that stuff I really latch onto.
I know one complaint people had for Last Jedi is there isn't really a lightsaber fight in it, as in there's lightsabers never clash in the film, and people have lightsabers and they fight, but they never actually hit each other. They do have that in here. Again, Rey and Kylo fight at least twice.
A couple times.
Or two, well, 2, 3, 4, I don't know. They fight a few times. How do we feel about those? Do we like the lightsaber fights in this film?
Yeah, they're fine. The first one I thought was really interesting because of where those two characters really are.
Yeah,
I find that to be fascinating.
And I find that as an interesting power that he somehow has. Which we
I think that's
we will go into that
power
power
from the Last Jedi.
But yeah, that's cool. I will say, well, yes, it's not a lightsaber fight. And they had this in the opening trailer. It was cool there. It was cool in the movie when they first meet each other and Rey cuts up his the vehicle that he's driving. That was really cool.
Yeah, there's some really great visual stuff in this movie. I feel like the action is all solid.
Yeah, it's just kind of too much of it sometimes.
Yeah, a little too much. Again, I wish that they had allowed the movie to breathe a little bit more. But I think that they had so much that they wanted to accomplish in the movie that they felt they had to go at that breakneck speed. Most of my issues with this movie all revolve around script and story. The visuals are great. The action is solid and good. The acting is good. I don't feel like anybody was, phoning it in for this one. I feel like everybody was there and doing a really good job with what they were given. I think a lot of my issues with it just revolve around the story that they're telling and how they're telling it.
Okay, I will
say slipping into negatives.
Okay, I will say a positive. This will be a bit of a spoiler, so again, hopefully a brief one this time. Again, very obvious. This would have originally, if Carrie Fisher had lived, this would have been with her and Kylo.
Yes.
But the scene,
love that scene.
But the scene with Kylo and Han Solo is very nice. I do think it is. It's wonderful. Adam Driver obviously does great with it. Harrison Ford does.
He does better than he needed to do.
Yeah, we see him so much of the time. I think we see, even though I don't think it's actually really true, we see Han Solo more of as a manly, tough figure, even though he's really more of a soft person than even the character wants to admit he is.
He tries to be tough.
He tries to be tough, but
he wants to be tough.
It's kind of like I think we talked about in the Solo thing, is that he's really not. He's a lot of talk, but he can't really walk the walk. But we see a very genuine. We saw a bit of this at the end of Force Awakens, but really here we see a very genuine, probably the warmest we've ever seen his character. And he's gentle and he's just very loving, and it was just a wonderful thing to see that aspect to that character and to see maybe how he probably was as a dad, which we don't get to see.
And the thing that I do really like about that scene is that he specifically calls out that he's not really there. He's not a Force ghost. It's just Kylo's memory, his dad. And I think that's very powerful because that tells you that in the Last Jedi, Luke says, if you strike me down in anger, I'll always be with you, just like your father. And this shows that is true, that Ben Solo always held on to those memories of his dad. He keeps trying to say that Han Solo is a terrible father. He was never there. He would have disappointed you as a father. But this shows that there really was a loving relationship there. And I think that can be pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's kind of like he basically is a lot like his dad in the sense that he's lying to himself about who he really is and about his relationships. He's just doing it in a very unhealthy, very dark, very toxic way. Talking to himself way that he's lying about who he is, and he has, again, apparently good memories about his dad. Wonderful. Thinks very highly of his dad, really. He just doesn't want to admit it to himself. Partially because at this point, he's killed his father. He's done horrible things. He's overseen the killing of probably millions, if not billions or more people. So he feels terrible. So he needs to just, that's all he has at that point is the anger. So that's what he's trying to hold on to. Right. But at the end of the day, in his heart of hearts, he still loves his dad, who he still thinks very highly of. He still loves his mother, who he thinks very highly of. He just doesn't want to admit it to himself. So again, it is kind of, I think, an accidental part, not even intentional, like father, like son type thing.
And I think it actually, in a way, works better than if it had been Leia. Because I feel like if it had been Leia, it would have been too much of a copy of what Luke did in The Last Jedi. It would have felt repetitive, because in The Last Jedi, Luke force projects to confront Kylo Ren. And if Carrie Fisher had been alive, then she would have basically been force projecting herself to interfere with Kylo.
Possibly. She might have been, if she had been more there, obviously they probably would have used her more, so she may have not have just stayed on the Resistance base the whole time. She might have traveled at least a bit. I always projected that she would be pivotal to him turning good if he did turn good. That she would be pivotal to that because obviously she's the only one left and she's his mother, so obviously she's going to play a part in that. But that she would actually be there, maybe not even just be there physically, but maybe even be there doing the climactic thing against Snoke, or in this case the Emperor, and be there to say, no, you are a good person, and have that moment where he finally changes. So I wonder if she would have actually been there physically. Again,
maybe, but I really liked that scene with Han Solo. That was, a surprise, to be sure. I was not expecting that, and I think that they played it off really well.
I think I was somewhat prepared that it might happen because I had heard rumors that Harrison Ford might have filmed something for it. I will say, when Leia finally does die, the moment with Chewie, I cried at that. That was heartbreaking.
That was good. Yes.
It was more effective even than his rage, his sorrowful rage when Han Solo died. This just total, and you can understand, especially at that point, well, two things. One, he's lost somebody who he's basically his nephew in Kylo. He's lost his best friend, who he's known for, 20, 30 years, and he's very dedicated to. And now he's lost the last link to that, someone who was, again, his friend, the wife of his best friend. And two, the person that Han Solo said, you need to take care of her, and now she is dead.
Right.
And he couldn't do anything about it, and now he's lost 3 people that were very close to him. He's even lost Luke. He doesn't, he has like his Lando, I suppose, but
that breakdown scene was, I won't say that I cried, but that was probably the most emotion that I felt in the movie.
Yeah, it's very, and the music there, I can't remember the exact music, but the music was very well used there. And it actually makes me, I'm thinking about it now, I am sad, obviously you couldn't do anything about it, but I am sad that Peter Mayhew didn't get to do that. Because that would have been a great opportunity for him, and a great thing for him to do in the final film, is to have that really showcase moment. It would have been a great moment.
I will say, I do really like the new guy who's playing Chewie. I think he does a really good job with the character.
How did you like?
I did enjoy the first time that we see Poe, Rey, and Finn together, and the bickering that you get amongst friends. Right, I found that to be charming. Overall, I really liked the feel of a lot of the scenes in the movie. The vibe, I really liked what they were going for. I enjoyed the chase scene on the whatever that desert planet was that they went to after the party. I thought the designs of the ships were really cool, and those little tread bike things that the stormtroopers were on and the jet troopers flew off of. I enjoyed the mystery that they were following and how they were following clues to get there. I think that the idea behind that was really solid. And again, anytime that Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver are on screen together, excellent. I give the highest praise to those portions of the movie. Overall, I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see it again.
They're going to make more Star Wars movies. We know that. Whether this will be the last of the Skywalker stuff, or whether or not there will be an episode 10, we don't know. Again, I hope there is an episode 10 or 11 or 12 or whatever, but we don't know. But if this truly is the last one, especially considering whatever order you decide to watch the movies in, 4, 5, 6, the Machete order, episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or not 10, 8, 9, whatever, as the last one. Is this satisfying? Do you think this works? Not just as the last one of this trilogy, but this is the end of 9 films.
As an end to the sequel trilogy, yes, it's satisfying. As an end to a 9-movie saga, I was not entirely satisfied.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, comes from what I was saying earlier, where it felt like they could have paid more homage to the prequel trilogy than they did.
Well, even the original trilogy, to a certain extent, they probably could have done better with.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. But I felt like this was definitely a fine conclusion to the J.J. Abrams helmed sequel trilogy movies.
Thinking about it now, I almost think watching episodes 1 through 6, Return of the Jedi is a much more satisfying. And
Yes.
going through all of that turmoil, to have that ending is a much more satisfying thing. I think part of the problem, too, is that it's very obvious that after the Return of the Jedi, the Skywalker story is kind of done, and they kind of have to force it to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
So these new movies are only very loosely Skywalker stories. And if they could have found a better way to continue that, so it's more, maybe have Luke be more at the forefront, so it's more obviously still a Skywalker story, instead of being only very loosely, because it really feels tacked on because of that, so it's less satisfying, because it's very obvious, 1 through 6 is very obviously a continuing story, and so it's more satisfying.
Well, and to build off of your earlier point about how we don't know if there's going to be more. There's going to be more. To me, it's pretty obvious the way this movie ends and the last line that is spoken in this movie. It's very obvious that there are going to be more Skywalker movies.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not against there being more stories with these characters necessarily. I just don't need them to be episode movies, in my thing. I don't mind more Star Wars movies to a certain extent. I just don't need them to be,
if there are more movies with these main characters, it's going to be like what The Force Awakens was, where it's going to be 20 years down the road and they bring these characters back for some reason. Yeah. I think that these actors are done playing these characters, at least the main three.
Yeah, I know Daisy Ridley has said that she doesn't want to continue after this, at least not right away.
So is Oscar Isaac and John Boyega. They're all saying, yeah, we're done. Now, they could just be saying that because they don't have any contracts in place, right? And they're just saying, like, we're done as far as we know. But I get the feeling that they at least want to have a break, right? Because you got to keep in mind, the other 6 movies, there were 3 years between each movies. These, it's only 2 years, and they're able to do maybe one project in between these Star Wars movies. And I think they just want to move on and do something else for a while.
Yeah, I mean, and it's important. I mean, Oscar Isaac obviously had a career before these movies. These have helped him to a certain extent, and he's older. And then you have, John Boyega and Daisy Ridley, who are not significantly, but they're a bit younger, obviously, than Oscar Isaac. And I'm sure they're young actors who want to branch out and do different stuff. They have basically the whole careers to look forward to. So yeah, they're going to want to do different stuff. They've done a little bit. I don't know much about John Boyega's other projects. I've seen Daisy Ridley. I know she did a Hamlet stuff. She did something which hasn't come out yet with Tom Holland. She did
Murder on Orient Express. Yeah. John Boyega did that movie where he was a police officer in Boston, maybe.
Was he also in
Race Riots or something? And then he was in...
Was that movie with Emma Watson? Was there a movie with Emma Watson?
I don't remember that. Pacific Rim.
That's right. Sequel. I forgot about that, which I haven't seen, but yeah.
If you had seen it, it would have been still forgettable. But yeah, the end of the Skywalker saga is marketing, and I am very certain that there will be more, even if we don't live long enough to see them.
Especially since this is possibly the end of at least the episode movies. Again, at the very least, we know they're going to make more TV shows.
For now, yeah.
They're going to make some more movies that have nothing to do with the main, or as much as they can, nothing to do with the saga films. But if this really is the end of it, where do you want to see Star Wars go necessarily? What are you
What am I looking forward to?
I guess, or is there something beyond just the TV shows and obvious spin-off movies that you would like to see?
That's really hard because we have really no inclination of what is even possible, because the Star Wars universe is so vast. I really want to see Indiana Jones 5. Oh, we're talking Star Wars, right.
I think you actually want to see Indiana Jones 5.
I do actually want to see Indiana Jones 5. I really want to see what Rian Johnson's going to do. And I think that that's going to be, from what I understand, more along the lines of what we were talking about earlier, in that he is going to do the first one and then oversee the other 2 movies. But somebody else will be at the helm. But he will still oversee it.
Which makes sense for him, because I know he likes to do original projects like Knives Out.
Right.
And if he did all 3 of that stuff directed, he wouldn't be able to do that stuff for a long time.
Right.
Probably at least a decade.
And I'm actually kind of surprised that someone like him would even consider returning to Star Wars.
Yeah.
Because he's not a series kind of guy, right? He does one-off things. He doesn't do franchises. But I think that he enjoys Star Wars enough, and he enjoyed the collaborative process they had with Lucasfilm enough that he wants to come back because of that. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think he's got a very unique voice and vision for the Star Wars universe, so I think that'll be good. As far as what stories I want to have told, the options are endless, really. I don't think that we'll see anything take place after episode 9, just so that they can leave the door open for when they do bring back these characters or start up in episode 10. So I don't even think you'll see spin-off stuff take place after episode 9.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to see what they're going to do, what TV shows they'll do, eventually watching The Mandalorian, eventually watching whatever the hell they do with Obi-Wan, and to see where they go. And again, hoping they don't do I think now, not just with Star Wars, but with Star Trek, especially doing it, and then the Marvel movies have kind of done to a certain extent, is sticking with the familiar works to a certain extent, but I think is bad in the long run. You really need to diversify, and again, part of the problem with Star Trek, again, is that they want to stay in this kind of bubble time frame stuff. They're starting to, I think they're getting away from it a little bit with the new Picard show, but, they kind of want to stay in this little bubble of familiar stuff instead of going really far into the past. Well, they kind of do it with Enterprise, I suppose, or going really far into the future or whatever. Just do something very fresh and new instead of just doing, I know it's harder to market, it's more of a risk, but
you're gonna really like The Mandalorian.
Yeah, because the familiar stuff only works for so long. People just get frustrated, and eventually they stop, and the box office receipts or TV viewings go down because people eventually get tired of seeing the same thing. So just to wrap things up, again, thank you, Andrew, for coming on.
My pleasure.
We'll probably talk about The Mandalorian at some point, or some of the other spin-off-y things. We don't talk about TV much on this show, but we can maybe do it. But anyway, that's going to be it for now. So until next time, I will catch you guys later. Hope you guys all enjoyed that. Please join the discussion below. I'd love to hear your opinions. If you liked this episode, please hit the little like button, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. A link to my film blog, where you can find text and movie reviews, along with all my video and audio material, can be found in the description below. You can also find me on Twitter at CinemaPackRat, while I babble on about film and give updates on the status of videos and blog posts. In the meantime, please check out some of my video reviews or other podcast episodes, like the one in the annotations.